Today's lesson is getting started with formal dining. Hi, everybody. I'm Roger.
And I'm Helen.
And today we've got a conversation between Hazel and Owen. And Hazel wants some advice on how to eat in a fancy restaurant. And this is, of course, our conversation about getting started with formal dining. Of course, if you have informal dining, like in the night market or at a fast food restaurant, you don't need to worry about this stuff too much. But if you go to a fancy restaurant, you're going to need to know a thing or two about etiquette.
Yes, I would say that most forms of dining would fall under the category of informal dining. That includes eating at a fast food restaurant, a diner, or any other restaurant that you would come across in your neighborhood, in the city. But sometimes you might be in a situation where you have to eat in a formal setting, and that may be in a fancy restaurant that is a bit more expensive, or perhaps you're invited to somebody's house and they have a formal setting, or perhaps you're going to a wedding banquet and those are quite formal as well. And in these situations, you might be presented with some things that you should learn before you actually start eating.
Right, so in today's conversation, again, we've got Hazel and Owen, and she's asking him for some advice about eating in a fancy, elegant restaurant. So let's listen now to their conversation in part 1, Learning Formal Dining Etiquette.
Getting started with formal dining. Learning formal dining etiquette. Hazel and Owen are chatting in the office break room.
I'm really worried about this dinner with my boyfriend and his parents. It's at a very elegant restaurant, and I don't know much about formal dining etiquette.
Don't sweat it. I can give you some tips. What are you most worried about?
Basically, I just don't want to embarrass myself, but I'm not even sure which utensils to use or when to use them.
Ah, I see. Well, the general rule is to use the utensils from the outside in. So you'll use the one farthest from your plate for the first course, the one next farthest for the second course, and so on. Also, when you're eating, be sure to cut your food into one or a few bite-sized pieces at a time.
Got it. How about the placement of utensils on your plate? I heard that certain positions indicate specific meanings.
That's right. For example, when taking a break during your dinner, you should place your fork and knife on the plate so that they form an inverted V. And when you finish eating and are ready for the plate to be cleared, you can place them together in a parallel position with the handles at the 4 o'clock position on your plate.
大家好，第一部分我们来介绍名词 etiquette， 它的意思是礼仪、礼节或是行为规范。例如 In Japan, there is a special etiquette to bowing. 在日本有一个关于鞠躬的特殊礼仪。又或者说 When eating in foreign countries, it's very important to learn the correct dining etiquette. 在国外用餐时，学习正确的餐桌礼仪非常重要。再来，我们看到形容词 elegant， 它的意思是雅致的、优雅的，也可以是文字或是想法简洁的、巧妙的。例如Amanda wore an elegant dress to dinner. Amanda 穿了一件雅致的洋装去晚宴。又或者说 It costs more money to stay in the elegant hotel, but I find it worthwhile. 要住在一间雅致的饭店要花更多钱，但我认为很值得。接下来我们看到动词 embarrass， 这个字的意思是使尴尬或是使窘迫。例如 Peter embarrassed Erica by asking her some personal questions. Peter 问了 Erica 一些私人的问题，让她觉得很尴尬。或是 Please don't embarrass me in front of my friends. 请不要在我朋友面前让我尴尬。另外，在这个字的字尾加上 ment 就会变成名词 embarrassment。例如 My sister's cheeks turned red from embarrassment. 我姐姐的双颊因尴尬而变得通红。或者 Nick made several mistakes during his performance and he couldn't hide his embarrassment. Nick 在表演时犯了好几个错，而他无法掩藏他的尴尬。下一个我们看到单字 placement， 它是名词，指的是摆放位置、放置或是布置。例如 The boss used consumer psychology to develop strategies for things like item placement and store layout. 这位老板利用消费者心理学制定出商品摆设位置和店面布置策略。又或者说 I must finish the placement for wedding guests before Tuesday. 我必须在星期二之前完成婚礼宾客的座位配置。下一个我们看到单字 parallel， 它是形容词，指的是平行的、类似的。例如 The artist drew several parallel lines as a guide to help him achieve proper perspective. 那名艺术家画了几条平行的线，帮助他取得适当的视角。又或者说 Maggie leads a parallel life in the online game she plays. Maggie 在她玩的线上游戏里过着平行人生。
So the title of part 1 of today's lesson is Learning Formal Dining Etiquette. So etiquette here refers to a set of rules for behaving correctly in a social situation. And you can talk about dining etiquette, which is how to behave in a formal dining situation. But etiquette is required for some other situations as well. So if you go to the gym regularly, for instance, there's also gym etiquette. When you finish using a dumbbell or a barbell, you might want to put it back on the rack, or you want to wipe it down with alcohol so that the next user won't get your sweat all over them, all over their hands. So that would be considered gym etiquette. So etiquette isn't just for fancy, formal situations. It's just a way of behaving so that everybody can benefit from a situation.
Yes, indeed. And you do need to know about dining etiquette if you're going to a fancy restaurant. And that's what Hazel's going to do. Hazel and Owen are chatting in the office break room. And Hazel begins the conversation. She says, I'm really worried about this dinner with my boyfriend and his parents. It's at a very elegant restaurant, and I don't know much about formal dining etiquette. How to behave, how to use the utensils and stuff like that. And yes, indeed, they're going to an elegant restaurant. If something's elegant, it's high class, it's graceful, it's stylish. You could say that a woman can wear an elegant dress, although you would not describe a man as wearing an elegant suit. We usually use the word elegant to describe women or restaurants.
Yes, so you can use elegant to describe a woman's dress or even a hotel, a restaurant. And it usually refers to something that's beautiful, but beautiful in a very simple way. Something that's very bright or loud wouldn't be considered elegant, though it might be beautiful still. But elegant has to do with simplicity as well as beauty. And here, Hazel is going to be dining at a very elegant restaurant, and she needs Owen's advice. And Owen says, don't sweat it. I can give you some tips. What are you most worried about? So Owen's first expression here, don't sweat it, just means don't worry. It's nothing that you have to worry about.
Right. Don't worry about it because, of course, if you're worried about something, you might sweat. You might have some perspiration because you're nervous or something like that. And he says, don't sweat it. Don't worry about it. I can give you some tips. A related expression using the word sweat is no sweat. Hey, can you help me with this? Can you do me a favor? No sweat. It's not a problem at all. I'm more than happy to help you. But here, of course, he's going to give her some advice or some tips. And first of all, what are you worried about? What are you most worried about if you're going to this elegant restaurant?
And Hazel replies, basically, I just don't want to embarrass myself, but I'm not even sure which utensils to use or when to use them. So Hazel's main concern is that she might embarrass herself. To embarrass yourself means to do something to make yourself feel stupid or ashamed. You might embarrass yourself if you've forgotten somebody's name at a party. If somebody approaches you and says, hey, Helen, how are you doing? And you just can't remember that person's name and you're trying to get out of the situation. Or you might be walking down the street and you trip and fall and everybody looks at you. That might be a situation that makes you feel embarrassed.
Right, that's the verb here, to embarrass yourself. Embarrassing describes the situation. It's very embarrassing when you belch in public. It's very embarrassing. You embarrass me when you belch or burp in public, so don't do it. It's embarrassing. And here she says, I don't want to be embarrassed, or I don't want to embarrass myself. but I'm not even sure which utensils to use or when to use them. So if you go to a Western restaurant and it's a fancy restaurant, indeed, they will have lots of utensils on the table. Most people can get by with just 3, a knife, a spoon, and a fork, but in a formal restaurant, you're going to have many more kinds of utensils, like your salad fork and your regular fork and your soup spoon and your regular spoon and your dessert spoon. You've got all sorts of different utensils, and those are basically the tools we use to eat food.
Yes, and you have different knives as well. You have the butter knife and you have the knife for cutting meat. So it is quite confusing. And Owen replies, I see. Well, the general rule is to use the utensils from the outside in. So you'll use the one farthest from your plate for the first course, the one next farthest for the second course, and so on. And this is very practical advice. Owen is basically saying you don't have to memorize which utensil is for which type of food or for which course. All you have to do is start using the utensil that's farthest from your plate and then work yourself in towards the one that's nearest towards your plate. So there are different courses. Often in French restaurants and European restaurants, you have the main course, you have the appetizer. Dessert is a course as well. And you should expect to have different courses when you're in such restaurants. And Owen gives her this advice. And he also says, when you're eating, be sure to cut your food into one or a few bite-sized pieces at a time. So unlike Taiwanese food, a lot of Western food that's served on plates require cutting. Taiwanese food, on the other hand, is already served in most cases in bite-sized pieces. So all you have to do is pick up the pieces with your chopsticks or with your fork and put them in your mouth and you're all set. But in a lot of situations in Western restaurants, you have to cut your steak or cut your chicken cutlet. And Owen is reminding Hazel, be sure that you cut your food into bite-sized pieces. So bite size is a size that you can bite, that you can put in your mouth and chew without having to open your mouth really widely to take a chunk of meat from the chicken leg or doing other things like that that may not look very elegant.
Right, so cut those pieces of food into small pieces that you can bite at one time, and you'll look like you're really classy if you do that. And then Hazel says, I got it. I understand. How about the placement of utensils on your plate? Placement just refers to how things are put in a certain location. She's talking about the placement of the utensils on the plate as you're eating. And yes, there are some general rules about that. She says, I heard that certain positions or certain placements indicate specific meanings. And that's true. Different kinds of cuisine, if you put your utensils on the plate a certain way, it will let the waiter know that you're done or that you want more food or things like that.
Owen says that's right. For example, when taking a break during your dinner, you should place your fork and knife on the plate so that they form an inverted V. So, in other words, sometimes you're eating and you're not going to be eating nonstop. You want to stop for a while. Maybe you want to take a break. You're talking to your neighbor, so you just want to pause for 30 seconds, 40 seconds, and the waiter may come along and think that you've finished eating. To let the waiter know that you haven't finished your meal yet, what you should do is place your fork and your knife on the plate in an inverted V position. So inverted means in the opposite direction of what it should be normally. A V should normally have the angle at the bottom and then it branches out into two lines on top. An inverted V would be the opposite. So you have the angle at the top and then the two lines at the bottom. You could also say, for instance, that the letter W is an inverted letter M or vice versa.
And when you finish eating and you are ready for the plate to be cleared, you can place them together in a parallel position with the handles at the 4 o'clock position on your plate. So parallel means they don't cross each other. Parallel lines never cross, for example, or roads in a city can be parallel to each other. But in this particular case, you place your utensils on the plate in a parallel position, and the handles, or where you hold the utensils, will be at the the 4 o'clock position, so I suppose the other end of the utensils will be at the 10 o'clock positions.
Yes, so that's what you would do if you have finished eating. And this is a piece of advice that Owen has given to Hazel. And Hazel should feel much more confident now about going to this dinner with her boyfriend's parents.
Okay, that brings us to the end of part 1 for our lesson for today. Let's go on to part 2 and learn some more rules and tips for formal dining.
More rules and tips for formal dining. Hazel and Owen continue their discussion. All right, I think I've got it. But what about other things like what to wear or how to behave?
Those are important too. For dress, it's best to err on the side of being too formal rather than too casual. But for behavior in general, it's kind of common sense. You know, don't put your elbows on the table and don't talk with your mouth full.
These are some good tips, but I'm still kind of vague on the details.
Okay, then let's move on to some more specific rules and tips. First, always use your napkin properly. When you sit down, unfold it and place it on your lap. Use it to dab your mouth. Remember to place it neatly on the table to the left of your plate when you're finished.
I think I'm feeling more confident now. Thanks for all the advice.
No problem. I'm happy to help.
第二部分我们看到单字 vague， 它是形容词，指的是模糊的、不清楚的或是含糊其辞的。例如 When I asked Callum what his plans were for the weekend, he only gave me a vague reply. 当我问起 Callum 的周末计划，他只给我一个模糊的回复。或是 Micah was vague about his plans after graduation. Micah 对于他毕业后的打算还不清楚。最后介绍动词 unfold， 它指的是展开、打开或是展现、呈现。例如Reporters were on the scene as the election unfolded. 随着选举展开，记者们都在现场待命。
So the title of part 2 is More Rules and Tips for Formal Dining. And Hazel and Owen continue their discussion about what to do in a formal dining situation. Hazel says to Owen, all right, I think I've got it. But what about other things like what to wear or how to behave? So Hazel has the dining part all set. She knows what to do with her utensils and she knows about the placement of the utensils and which one she should use first for which course. But what about other things like what should she wear? What should she say? And what gestures should she use when she talks to the people she's dining with?
Exactly. And Owen says, well, those are important too. They are equally important for dress or how you dress. It's best to err on the side of being too formal rather than too casual. So here, to err on the side of something means you have two situations that might be wrong, but he's saying, well, of the two that might be wrong, you should choose this one. So err on the side of being too formal. You would probably look better if you're too formal than you would if you were too casual. It's just safer to wear formal clothes in this particular setting and not worry whether you're wearing casual clothes like jeans and sneakers.
Yes, a very common expression in the English is err on the side of caution. And that means if you have two situations, one is riskier than the other, then you would choose the less risky situation so that you are more cautious about hurting yourself, losing something. You can apply that to investments. You don't want to spend too much money on investment, so you would err on the side of caution by not investing in something that could be risky.
Okay, and then Owen goes on to say, but for behavior in general, or how you act around other people, it's kind of common sense. You know, don't put your elbows on the table and don't talk with your mouth full. These are general rules that pretty much everyone knows, yet when you eat, you're not supposed to put your elbows on the table. I remember my mother telling me that when I was a kid. Don't put your elbows on the table. It's impolite. And also, you should not talk with your mouth full. If somebody asks you a question, wait till you've swallowed the food before you answer their question.
Yes, and Hazel says these are some good tips, but I'm still kind of vague on the details. So Hazel appreciates all the tips that Owen has given her, but she's still not sure about some of the details of these tips because maybe she's not able to see them in her mind. She still doesn't know exactly what she should do, so she still is kind of vague on them. Vague means unclear or confusing or confused.
Right, so sometimes, of course, when politicians are running for a political office and they're asked a question, well, they're very seldom specific. They just give vague answers that sound good but actually don't give us any useful information. And in this particular case, yeah, she's kind of vague. She's not very certain on the details. And Owen says, okay, then let's move on to some more specific rules and tips. Let's talk about those. Let's be more specific. First, always use your napkin properly. Okay, the napkin is very important in a formal dining setting. When you sit down, unfold it and place it on your lap. So yes, indeed, when you sit down at a table in a fancy restaurant, the napkins will be folded in a certain way on the table. So you unfold it. You open it up and then you place it on your lap or the top of your legs.
Yes, you can also unfold a letter. You unfold anything that was folded, something that's flat and thin like towels or pieces of paper. So that's unfolding. And then he says after you unfold your napkin, you put it on your lap and you can use it to dab your mouth. So when you're eating and you need to clean your mouth with the napkin, you don't want to use that napkin and drag it across your mouth and spit into it or blow your nose. What you're supposed to do is dab your mouth with a napkin. To dab is an action that's very gentle. You can use a paintbrush to dab some paint gently onto a canvas, onto a surface. So it just means gently touching something, a surface, with something else. And in this case, it's a napkin, but you can also use a towel, you can use a paintbrush to dab things with.
And Owen goes on to say, remember to place it neatly on the table to the left of your plate. And Hazel says, I think I'm feeling more confident now. Thanks for all the advice. Thanks for the information. And Owen says, no problem. I'm happy to help, and hopefully she'll have a successful dinner with her boyfriend's parents. Okay, that brings us to the end of our explanation for today. Let's turn things over now to Hanny.
各位同学大家好，我是 Hanny。 我们来看今天的文法重点。课文第一部分的对话里， Hazel 说他连该用什么餐具或是什么时候使用都不知道。那这边他用到 which utensils to use 以及 when to use them。 然后在第二部分的对话里面，他也继续向 Owen 询问其他事情，像是该穿什么或是要如何表现。这边则是用到 what to wear 以及 how to behave。 好，像这些用法呢，就是在 WH 疑问词后面接不定词 to V 来形成名词片语。那这样的名词片语在句中可以当主词、受词或是主词不语用。我们就来看3个例句哦。第一个例句是 Where to hold the party is not decided yet。 在哪里举办派对尚未决定。我们这边用到名词片语 Where to hold the party， 这是当主词，我们把它视为单数，所以后面要搭配单数动词 is。 好，第二个例句是 Do you know which way to go？ 你知道要走哪一个方向吗？句中的名词片语 which way to go 是当受词，那这时候它就是当动词 know 的受词了。好，再来第3个例句是 The problem is how to convince them。 问题就在于要如何说服他们。那句中的名词片语 how to convince them 是当主词补语，用来对这个主词的 problem 做补充说明，让句子的语义变完整。好，那么另外在课文第一部分的对话里， Owen 他有提到用餐时间稍作休息时，应该将刀叉放在盘子上，让它们呈倒 V 形状。好，那他用到 an inverted V 来指倒 V。 这个动词 invert 就是表达使倒置或是使颠倒的意思。对话里面呢，则是用过去分词来当形容词去表达倒转的。好，那我们就来学习一下 invert 字首字根。VERS 和 VERT 这2个字根呢，都有转动啊、翻转或是变动的意思。 那带有这一类的字根的字大多含有改变原状的语义。好，那么在 invert 这个字当中，它的字首 in 表示在点点点之中或是在点点点之上，那么字根 vert 表示翻转。好，那当我们把东西内外或是上下翻转，它就会前后倒置或是上下颠倒。用这样的方式，也许可以联想到 invert 就有使倒置、使颠倒的意思了。好，那也补充2个有这一类字根的单字。第一个是 convert， 它的字首 con 表示 together 一起，那么字根 vert 是指 turn 也就是转，那全部一起翻转，应该可以联想到 convert 它就有转换、改变的意思咯。第二个补充的是 versatile 或是念作 versatile， 它的字根 vers 表示转，那么 at 是来自动词字尾 ate 表示使成为，那么 ile 则是形容词字尾表示具有某种能力。我们从这个字根字尾的表面意思来看呢， versatile 它是指说具有多变的能力，那从这个语义中又带出了那种多才多艺的意思了。好，那么以上今天重点整理，我们来回顾今天的单字吧。
Elegant. Vivian wore an elegant dress to the party. Embarrass. Linda was embarrassed when she realized she had food stuck in her teeth. Placement. The museum director wanted the placement of the paintings to be just right. Parallel. With desks arranged in parallel rows, the classroom looked neat and tidy. Behavior. The doctor carefully observed the patient's strange behavior. Vague. We got lost because the directions provided were too vague. Unfold. Clarence carefully unfolded the letter he'd received from the university.
Well, everyone, today's article has come to an end, and I sure hope you enjoy reading along with us. I am Helen.
I am Roger.
See you next time.